Hello fellow mystery lovers. Well, today our look at Sherlock continues with this special episode, The Abominable Bride. So, here we go. The plot swings between Victorian England and the present day, with the congruities accepted in good faith. In the 19th century, Dr. John Watson has been medically discharged from the army and moves to London. Watson is introduced by Sherlock Holmes by a fellow student of Bart's, and becomes interested in his investigative principles. Holmes invites Watson to share his new flat in Baker Street, which Watson accepts. In 1895, Inspector Lestrade presents Holmes and Watson with a puzzling case. Amelia Recoletti, a consumptive bride, had fired on bypassers in the street from a balcony before fatally shooting herself. Later that evening, Mr. Recoletti was confronted by Amelia, who shot him dead before disappearing into the fog. Fascinated by Amelia's apparent survival, Holmes takes the case. At the morgue, Dr. Hooper informs Watson that the woman who killed herself, the woman who murdered Mr. Recoletti, and the body on hand have all been positively identified as Amelia Recoletti. Confused, Holmes loses interest in the case. When the bride apparently returns to murder other men, he deduces that these are copycat crimes. Months later, Holmes' brother Mycroft refers him to a case. Lady Carmichael's husband, Sir Eustace Carmichael, received a threatening warning in the form of an envelope full of orange pips. Sir Eustace is uncooperative, describing his wife as hysterical. Holmes and Watson stake out the house for the evening. A ghostly-looking bride appears and disappears in front of them, and the pair hear the sound of breaking glass, followed by screams from both Sir Eustace and Lady Carmichael. They discover Sir Eustace, stabbed to death, by what appears to be Amelia, but then escapes through a broken window. Lestrade arrives and observes the note attached to the dagger, which Holmes says wasn't there when he found the body. The note reads, "Miss me?" a phrase used by the modern-day James Moriarty. After insisting that the case's solution is so simple that even Lestrade could solve it, Holmes meditates. Moriarty appears and insults Holmes about the mystery of Amelia's seeming suicide revival, alluding to his similar apparent death in the present. Moriarty shoots himself in the head, but remains alive. In the present day, it is revealed that the events of Victorian England are actually occurring within Sherlock's drug-laden mind palace. The plaintiffs return to England minutes after taking off after Moriarty's broadcast, and Mycroft, John, and Mary entered the plane to find a frustrated Sherlock rambling about the unsolved Recoletti case. Sherlock explains he had hoped to solve the case, proving that it would be crucial to solving Moriarty's return. Over Watson's protest, Sherlock again takes drugs to re-enter his mind palace. Victorian Holmes awakens, with an awareness of events of the present as a seeming hallucination induced by cocaine. Holmes receives a telegram from Mrs. Watson saying she has found Amelia's co-conspirators at a desanctified church. There, Holmes and Watson discover and interrupt a secret group of the women's rights movement, similar to the suffragette movement in the late 19th century, whose members include Dr. Hooper, Janine Hawkins, and Watson's maidservant. Holmes explains that they used a double to fake Amelia's death, allowing her to kill her husband and create the persona of the avenging ghost bride. Already dying, she was later killed at her request by being shot through the mouth. The duplicate corpse was replaced by her actual corpse, the one Holmes and Watson saw at the morgue, for positive identification. Since then, the women have used the persona of the bride to murder men who wronged them. Sherlock assumes that Lady Carmichael, being a member of the society, killed her husband. He makes his accusation to the approaching bride, assuming that it is Lady Carmichael. When he lifts the bride's veil, however, he finds that the bride is actually Moriarty. Sherlock reawakens in the present, where he insists on finding Amelia's grave to prove that her body double was buried under the coffin. While digging, he hears Amelia's corpse repeatedly whisper, "Do not forget me." The corpse moves to attack him, and Holmes awakens in the past on a ledge next to the Reichenbach Falls. Moriarty appears and tells Holmes he is still trapped in his mind palace. Holmes realizes that the incident at the grave is just another episode in the same dream. The men fight and Moriarty gains the upper hand, but Watson appears and holds Moriarty at gunpoint. Watson kicks Moriarty off the ledge and then asks Holmes how he can waken into the present. Holmes decides to fall over the ledge, having confidence he will survive. Sherlock wakes up in the present on the plane. Mycroft asks John to look after Sherlock, hoping he will not use drugs again. After John leaves the plane, Mycroft opens Sherlock's notebook, revealing the word Redbeard. Sherlock concludes that, like Ricoletti, Moriarty did die but arranged with others to carry out plans after his death. The episode ends with Victorian Holmes describing his visions of aeroplanes and mobile telephones to a cynical Watson, before looking out the window onto Baker Street in the present day. Wow, that's a lot to take in, but it's still good nonetheless. Anyway, let's look at the filming of this episode. Filmed Tuesday, January 6th until February 10th, 2015. Filming took place at Tintisfield House, sorry if I butchered that, a National Trust property at Rowaxall near Bristol. Scenes were also shot in the cellars of Colston Hall and Arnoldsville Cemetery in Bristol, and other locations in Bath, Somerset. Tintisfield was mainly used as Sir Eustace's house, but also the Watsons' London home. The final scene of the episode puts forth the possible concept that all of the series in its modern-day setting are actually playing out for the Victorian Holmes' Mind Palace. Mark Gatiss stated in Sherlock the Abominable Bride post-mortem, quote, "By having that scene right at the end, where we go back to Victorian London, Victorian Baker Street, as Sherlock explicitly said, it's an imagined version of what I think the future might be. We have really opened a ludicrous window that the entire series of Sherlock might be the drunkard's ravings of the Victorian Sherlock Holmes, which means we can do absolutely anything." Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, let's wrap this up by looking at Sherlockian references. Moriarty stating, "There was nothing new under the sun, it's all been done before," comes from one of Arthur Conan Doyle's original Sherlock Holmes stories, A Study in Scarlet, but also refers to the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 9. "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." Mycroft's mentioning of the Manor House case references the Greek interpreter. So I want to say this episode is actually pretty interesting, and going back and forth between the two time periods is actually kind of cool, and I like it. So overall, I give The Abominable Bride 5 Deer Stalkers out of 5. Well, join me tomorrow as we take a look at the first episode of Season 4, The Six Thatchers. So, until then, remember everyone, the game's afoot.